Plan for America podcast is a show dedicated to national unity through prosperity that's achieved by free market capitalism. We believe that a rising tide does lift all boats. This show will be positive, solution-oriented, and nonpartisan. Our only agenda is for the prosperity of our country and her people. All are welcome here. This show will not be argumentative or incendiary, sensational, or polarizing and divisive. What we are presenting is a positive solution to one of America's greatest problems. Hello and welcome to Plan for America podcast, coming to you from Dynamic Reality Technologies on the campus of Coastal Alabama Community College in Fairhope, Alabama. I'm your host, Eric Nager, and we're very pleased to have today as our guest, Mr. Steve Moore, who's an economist with FreedomWorks and one of the earliest endorsers of Plan for America. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks so much for having me. Love what you guys are doing.
Well, before we get started, please tell us a little bit about your background, your education, and some of your credentials. I have a copy of your book here, Trumponomics, of course, which I think is your most recent one, possibly the one inside the America First plan to revive our economy. Please give us a little background on you.
Well, I'm a trained economist. I got my degree at University of Illinois, and then I got my master's at George Mason University outside of Washington, D.C. I worked 10 years as the senior economic analyst for the Wall Street Journal. I was the founder of a group called the Club for Growth, and started that and worked the first 6 years getting that off the ground. I have written a number of books. You mentioned Trumponomics. I wrote a book called It's Getting Better All the Time with Julian Simon about all the trends of human improvement. I wrote this book right here. I don't know if you can see this. It's called Government America's #1 Growth Industry. And and this was written 25 years ago. I would guess I was before my time in writing that. And so now I work with my friends at the FreedomWorks, which is a membership organization, about 6 million concerned citizens about the direction of our country that support liberty and free enterprise. And so it's good. I was able to work with Donald Trump in 2016 and many times throughout his presidency. And very sad that we have a new regime that is, I think, going to do some severe damage to the economy if they do the things they say they're going to do.
Well, and I applaud your efforts to get the word out through FreedomWorks. This show is dedicated to hopefully helping to heal and unify our nation through prosperity that is achieved by free market capitalism. So we want to try to promote a message of prosperity. The rising tide does indeed lift all boats. And if I can quote you to you here for a moment, I'm going to quote your endorsement of Plan for America. You said, sure. Plan for America may be the most promising and pain-free solution to our exploding multi-trillion entitlement costs. This will provide better benefits to our seniors and at lower costs. That's a win-win for America. So I think I met you first. It was Freedom Fest in 2018. What attracted you to Plan for America, or what did you like about it?
Well, I love the fact that it's a choice-based system. I'm a big believer in limited government and more individual choice and people making up their own choices rather than having politicians tell them what they can and can't do. I love the fact that it will reduce our healthcare costs, that it'll provide people with a better return on their retirement savings, that it will eventually, I believe, won't it eventually lead to a balanced budget?
It will. I mean, we weren't even thinking about that so much right away because we're looking at solving the unfunded liabilities in long term, but at least pre-COVID deficits, let's put it that way, in the $1 trillion range, it would come close to, if adopted fully in year one, come close to a break-even budget in year one.
Well,
so
if we really wanted
we didn't even expect
necessarily. We really wanted to, heal our economy and get it moving again, we do Plan for America, not this dingbat $2 trillion spending bill that Biden wants to do. And, with $2 trillion, you could fund the whole Plan for America, probably half that cost to get it going. And then, of course, it saves massive amounts of money over time. And this would be quite a gift we would be giving to our children. You know, you and I are older, it probably won't affect our lives all that much, but it will the people behind us who are right now. I mean, I laugh because I see that I saw a poll the other day that, you know, a large majority of young people support Biden in his policies. I'm like, how can that possibly be? Don't they understand the joke's on them? That who do they think is going to pay this enormous debt? You and I aren't going to pay it. We'll be dead in our graves. They and their children will pay for the things that we're doing today that could, literally bankrupt our country. I'm very afraid right now. I have to say this. I'm terrified about the kind of policy ideas that I'm seeing coming out of Biden. And we need to have very populist, popular, and workable alternatives to Bidenomics. And that's why I like Plan for America.
Thank you so much. And I'll certainly share the link with you to the podcast when it comes out. And feel free to share with your contacts there. So let's jump right in then. I think one of the biggest things why a lot of younger people maybe don't realize the dangers of debts and deficits, maybe because of an idea called modern monetary theory, which kind of says that debts and deficits do not matter. What is modern monetary theory and where did it come from?
Well, where it comes from, nobody quite knows. I think it came from some, liberal economics professors at, some second and third rate, universities. But hey, look, the idea needs to be taken seriously. There are some things about monetary theory that make sense, but others that I think are very dangerous. So the idea is a country can continue to borrow and borrow and borrow until, when interest rates are as low as they are today. And look, there's something to that. If we could borrow to fix our healthcare system so that it would be, a first-rate, gold-plated healthcare system, for the rest of, for the next 100 years, I mean, it might make some sense to borrow for that. But you look at other countries around the world that have borrowed excessively, and it's not been a story that has ended well. Look at what's happened with Mexico and Argentina and Venezuela and Zimbabwe and Uruguay, and these countries, they borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, and they just crushed their economies and flattened. By the way, the people get hurt the most under those kinds of systems are people at the bottom, right? They're the ones who are the first people who lose their jobs. So I am worried about this. I mean, our debt, when I first came to Washington, just to give you a sense of how things have changed, I came to Washington, I think around 1983, 84. So that was, 36 years ago. And when I came to Washington, I never forget, we had our first $1 trillion debt. We went over the $1 trillion mark. Well, next year we're going to go over 30 trillion. Think about that. Think about that. Just we compounded our debt year after year. Now we are blessed by having low interest rates. Thank God. Can you imagine how big our debt would be if the interest rates start to rise? Yeah, we are seeing interest rates rise right now. And we are seeing, now look, the interest rates are still really low. You and I are old enough to remember when we had 18% mortgage rates in the 70s. But, we're not right now, you can get a mortgage 3-4%. But you're seeing those rates, climb. And have you noticed you're starting to see inflation climb? And I don't want to see that. Once inflation gets going, it can have a stampeding effect.
Right, and that's probably what the central bank, in fairness, is trying to create. They want inflation. They know how to deal with that because when inflation comes, they can raise interest rates, and they want the buyer's mentality. I want to buy it today because it will be more expensive tomorrow. What they're terrified of is deflation. They don't know how to fight that. That's what the Great Depression was.
Right.
I'm going to hold off buying something today because it's going to be less expensive tomorrow. And when that becomes a national mentality, the only thing that got out of us out of that was World War. So they want some inflation, but how do you strike the balance?
I agree with that. And, look, the last 3 or 4 years, the problem was deflation, not inflation, because, we had falling prices. Look what happened to farm prices. Look what happened to price of commodities and so on. Excuse me. So, but now we're starting to see these rates rise. And look, the point I would make is I'm not against borrowing per se. It makes sense to borrow for a home or borrow to build a business. Everyone does that. Borrowing is is certainly a defensible thing to do when you're borrowing for something that has a return to it, right? That will give you return over time. The problem is Joe Biden wants to spend $2 trillion and there's zero return on these things. I mean, there's no return to building the government subsidized solar power or windmills. I mean, those aren't efficient ways to get electric power. There's not, no return on, massive, mass transit systems that nobody rides. There's no return on, government giving money to people. I hate that idea. We shouldn't be giving checks to people. That just reduces their incentive to work and slows down the economy. So what really bothers me is the spending is so ill-designed. And with $2 trillion, we could eliminate the payroll tax for a full year. Did you know that? I mean, what would be a better use of our money? If every single worker in America and every business in America didn't have to pay payroll tax or this crazy spending plan. So, there's opportunity costs here. There'd be a transition cost to doing Plan for America. Let's use this money. If we have money that we want to borrow, let's set up the Plan for America, and then we'll have a system that will be so explosively, people love it. They'll have control of their healthcare. They'll have control of their retirement savings. We will be able to balance our budget over time. I mean, those are things that common sense Americans would like to see.
I agree with that. And, for real quickly, for interest rate purposes, I know that during the Trump administration, he proposed the idea of maybe 100-year bonds, and even Janet Yellen now, as a new Secretary of Treasury, proposed 50-year bonds, or at least think about them. That would help. But again, that's kind of a Band-Aid solution, isn't it?
It is. It would help a bit. I was one of the people who had written in the Wall Street Journal about that, and then President Trump picked up on the idea. It would help, but it's not going to solve the problem, right? It just reduces your interest costs a bit. But I do think, given how low interest rates are now, it makes sense to have longer term debt, because I think everyone knows that interest rates are not going to go down. They're going to go up over the next 5 and 10 and 20 years.
That would seem to be the case. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back with Stephen Moore from FreedomWorks. If you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about Plan for America, visit our website at www.planforamerica.us. There's an extensive Q&A section there. And if you don't see a question you have, then please ask us by email. You can order our book, Plan for America, How to Place the American Dream on a Sure Foundation Forever. That can be found on Amazon.com. You can like us on Facebook. And if you really like what you're hearing, you're welcome to contribute through our website. Plan for America is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and all contributions are tax deductible. I'm back here with Plan for America podcast with Stephen Moore, an economist with FreedomWorks. We were talking earlier about modern monetary theory. I do want to dive into that a little bit more. But one thing I want to follow up on from the first part of the show, Steve, you said you're not opposed to borrowing per se. And just to refresh you on Plan for America, there would be some borrowing in the transition.
Right.
The one provision of the plan is there be a private trust established by contract law to make it harder to change. Contract law among the federal government, the state governments, and this private trust that then U.S. citizens could opt into. And the trust would be able to issue bonds based on its 2% fee that it would take from all the money that would be in the trust. And so you could arguably make the case that that would be better paper than U.S. government paper. But the U.S. government, as part of the contract, would guarantee the bonds and pay the interest on the bonds. But there would be a transition where current beneficiaries would have to be paid off. And we feel, our research shows us that based on market returns, what you assume for market returns, that the lines would cross somewhere between 2054 and 2071. And so that seems still like a long way off, but at least it's light at the end of the tunnel. There's no solution in sight on the road we're on now. Would you not agree?
Right. And that's borrowing to set up a system that will provide generations of better healthcare and generations of better retirement savings and returns on their retirement. And I have to say that the people who would benefit the most, as I see it, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I think minorities, lower income people would be the biggest beneficiaries. I mean, the shame is we're not letting low income people invest and get rich. They're not getting the power of compound interest from Social Security. Social Security doesn't give you any interest, on it. And so I think that's a really great idea. I think it's good for women. I think it's good for minorities, for people with low incomes. I mean, it's a kind of win-win for the American economy in every direction. And it will reduce our debt burden, over the next, 30 or 40 years so that it's manageable. Because look, we can't, we're borrowing $2 trillion a year now. Last year, we borrowed over $3 trillion. They want to pass a $1.9 trillion bill this month, and then another $1 trillion bill the month after that. I mean, this is madness. It really is. It is frightening to me that you have serious economists who say that you can keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and that it's going to not bankrupt the country, because most sensible people know that it's a Ponzi scheme you're setting up, and we can't do that.
It is. And I want to press you a little more on that. What would a national bankruptcy look like? Because you referred to some other countries earlier, like Venezuela, like Zimbabwe, like Mexico and Argentina, that, those countries don't have the reserve currency of the world, like the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big advantage we have in this country. But what does it happen when, or how does it happen, and when does it happen that we lose confidence in the dollar? What happens then?
Well, it would be a tragedy if any currency were to, replace the United States as the global currency, because we have a big advantage. It's like a loan, an interest-free loan from the rest of the world when they pay dollars and they trade in dollars. So it's a great thing for America that we have the world reserve currency. I don't see anybody in the short term on the horizon. People say, oh, the China yuan may take over, and that's what the Chinese would want. I don't see that happening immediately, but if we continue to borrow at this pace and don't get control of our government spending, it's going to reduce the size of our economy. And, God forbid, we could be looking at China taking over from the United States as the world economic superpower, which, I'm one of those who believes America, for your and my lifetime, throughout our lifetime, the United States has been the preeminent superpower. And China is a real threat, and we're a force for good. I'm not so sure that the Chinese communist government is. So let's take growth seriously. Let's take good economics seriously. Let's do what's right for everyone in our economy, and we just don't do a very good job of that.
And you spoke earlier that the plan would benefit minorities and women. I think, as you mentioned earlier, the younger generation is who it may benefit the most. I talk to, in my business, a lot of young people under the age 35 and ask them if they ever expect to see a dime from the Social Security system today, and they all almost universally say no.
Right.
And wouldn't they like it if they had their 15.3 of their payroll taxes diverted into account in their own name that they could pass on to their heirs in perpetuity? I would think they'd love that. So
I love
how
that
do we get the
part of
word
this
out?
plan too. Yeah, I love that about this plan, and it's more secure. You get more secure with this kind of system. You have true income security and savings and retirement security. The thing about Social Security, they say they have a trust fund. I've always said that the problem is there's no trust and there's no fund. There's no fund. I think a lot of people think that this money is being saved in some kind of vault, in West Virginia or something, and that everybody has a little drawer and they can, there's money in there. It's not. It's all been spent. That's the thing. Your retirement income, my retirement income. Did you know this? It's already been spent. They've already spent the money.
Right. The only thing in the
IOU
right now is non-negotiable IOUs,
yeah,
which can only be redeemed by government money. It's the same thing, really, as having no plan at all or no system at all.
Right.
So, but again, I think this modern monetary theory can be used to kind of mask the problem. So what's the best argument to combat that? Why do debts and deficits matter?
So, I'm very disturbed about this because, as I just said, we're looking at, at least $2 trillion of additional spending and maybe $3 trillion of additional spending. And we tried this before. I mean, government spending doesn't stimulate anything except government. I don't even know where this crazy idea came that, the more the government spends, the better. No, it's the less the government spends, the better. I was friends with Milton Friedman, later in his life, and he was maybe the greatest economist since Adam Smith. And, I used to ask him, what's the most important thing we can do to get the economy to grow faster? He'd say, cut government spending, cut government spending. And yet somehow everybody's adopting exactly the opposite idea, that somehow increasing government spending is going to get the economy rolling. And so we had a big experiment in 2009 where we borrowed $800 billion. Remember that? That was the shovel-ready project. And it was a great, a big experiment, Keynesian economics. And, they said it was going to create millions of jobs. We're going to get the unemployment rate down. We're going to have 4% growth, all these wonderful things. Remember, they said how great it was going to be. And it was a complete failure in every regard. The economy, we had 8-9% unemployment for a long time. There was no summer recovery. Those were not shovel-ready projects. We actually ended up with fewer jobs than if we had borrowed nothing. And so, there's experiment and it didn't work. And yet what people like Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize winning economist who's very far on the left, he said he didn't have a good explanation for why it didn't work. And you know what he came up with? He said, oh, we didn't spend enough money. We didn't spend enough. So if we'd spent $2 trillion, everything would have been just fine, which is of course absurd. And so this is what Biden is saying today. He's saying, okay, the reason it didn't work is because we didn't borrow enough. So let's borrow 2 trillion. I guess if that doesn't work, we'll borrow 3 trillion. This is madness. And that is monetary theory. Somehow look, the point is very simple. The government can only give you $1 if it takes $1 away from me. There's no magic money in Washington. All debts have to be repaid. This money, is not magic pixie dust. It has to come from somebody. This idea, we're going to give everybody $1,400. Okay, they're going to give you $1,400. It has to come from the productive sector of the economy. So they're going to have to take $1,400 away from me. Somebody explain to me how that's additive to the economy, because maybe I'm missing something.
And in the previous administration, there was some of it was attempted to be targeted toward businesses like payroll protection and all that. I would think you would think some of those portions of the spending were good in that sense to help businesses get through a very difficult time.
Well, my feeling on that is that I was in favor of, as was Laffer and Steve Forbes, a loan program. But I was not in favor of giving people money for free. The free money, no. Look, the idea was you have healthy businesses, you want to give them a loan so they can get through the crisis, so they don't go bankrupt, but that they'd have to over 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years repay the loan. The government should never give money away for free. You have to repay it if you take money from the government. And now we're just passing out money like it's candy, like it's M&Ms. And you had a lot of businesses that signed up for that program that didn't need the money. They just didn't need it. And in fact, what happened was the healthiest businesses were the first ones to get the money. So I'm not a big believer that was a great program. I think we should have basically just kept the economy open is to the fullest extent possible. I think the evidence is pretty clear that the lockdowns were a total failure. And we should have provided short-term assistance for businesses and short-term relief for people who lost their jobs. But all of the government spending, I think, has exacerbated the crisis rather than solved it.
What would you say here, as we're coming to the end of the show, to private citizens? How should someone get involved or have a voice heard in order to promote more, I guess you could say, responsible government spending?
Well, we need big ideas and big ways to, we've dug ourselves into a ditch. So how do we get out of it? Well, you have one major element of this, the Plan for America. I like the flat tax idea too. I like the idea of educational vouchers. I mean, we need to, the left has a lot of big ideas and they're all wrong. And we have good ideas that are based on sound economics that have been tested and tried before. We know that they work. Your ideas for Social Security are not too different from what countries like Chile did. And they had huge return. What happened in Chile was an economic miracle when they put in place free market ideas like yours. So we have to remember that the free market system is the goose that lays the golden eggs. And it's not government. Wealth does not come from government. Government can only redistribute wealth. It can't create it. And I think all of Washington has forgotten that lesson.
Well, hopefully it's not too late. It's
never too late. We're going to win back. I think Americans are already aghast at, how much money is being spent, the anti-American energy. That's another thing. I mean, why aren't we producing American energy? We have more energy than any other country in the world. We have more oil, gas, coal. We should be building nuclear power plants. And all of that is being scuttled right now. I don't get it. Joe Biden should be putting American jobs first, and unfortunately he's not.
Steve, just a couple of rapid fire questions for people to, get to know you a little better. What's your favorite restaurant in the DC area?
Oh, I like the Ocean Air, which is a great seafood restaurant, and has really great fish. And as I've been putting on weight, I'm eating more fish now, so I love that.
All right. Well, hopefully you're staying in shape during the lockdown. How about your favorite family vacation that you've ever been on?
Well, we love to go to Florida. We love to go to Palm Beach. We love to go to some of the nice resorts there, although they're getting more, everybody's moving to Florida, as you know, and everybody's moving
Right.
south. They're moving to Alabama, they're moving to Texas, Tennessee. But I do like that. And I love, the other area of the country I love is the area around, sort of La Jolla in Southern California on the coast. It's just beautiful out there. So those are some of my favorite places on the earth to go to.
And what's a place you haven't been you'd like to visit?
I've been to Hawaii, but only for a couple of days. And I really want to go, spend a couple of weeks on some of the beautiful islands in Hawaii. And then the other one is, believe it or not, I've never been to Hong Kong, and I really want to go to Hong Kong because that's just the center of the free market capitalism system. And, I'm a free market capitalist, so I don't see it in action as long as it still remains independent of China, and that may not last much longer.
Yeah, I was going to say, you better hurry.
I know.
Better hurry. Anyway, Steve,
Talk
thanks
about,
so much.
by the way, talk about, killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. I mean, how stupid is China? I mean, the Hong Kong island, and yet they're trying to take a communist. So anyway, well, thank you so much, by the way, for having me. I love what you guys are doing at PFA. Everybody has to get that document so they understand how it works and how it'll improve the lives of not you and me, but really our kids.
Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. If you like what you're hearing and want to learn more about Plan for America, visit our website at www.planforamerica.us. There's an extensive Q&A section there, and if you don't see a question you have, then please ask us by email. You can order our book, Plan for America: How to Place the American Dream on a Sure Foundation Forever. That can be found on Amazon.com. You can like us on Facebook. And if you really like what you're hearing, you're welcome to contribute through our website. Plan for America is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and all contributions are tax deductible.